Good evening, folks, and welcome. We are so glad that you have joined us tonight. Welcome to our College and Beyond panel. My name is Cheryl Shank-Miller, and I'm the Director of Enrollment Management here at Eastside Prep, and I'm really excited to be concluding our EPS Community Panel Series for the 21-22 admission season with this look into what we call college and beyond. So everything that our program is driving toward and what happens next in the EPS journey for students. We know that for those of you who are applying for 5th grade, 6th grade, that we have a variety of questions that might feel really far off. For those that are applying for 9th grade, this might feel like, oh, you know, we know we're just a year or two out from really thinking about the college process in earnest. But wherever you are in this journey, we know that thinking about where an EPS education leads is something that's on the minds of many of our prospective families. So that's why we're here this evening. I'm excited to introduce you to our panelists, my colleagues, and an EPS alumna. So without further ado, we will get started with that. I'm very, very pleased to be able to introduce you to all of these folks. They are going to, I'm just going to give you a sense of who you're going to be meeting this evening. First of all, Ellie from the class of 2021. Dr. Olson, who is part of our college counseling team and is also one of our English faculty at the school, and then Bart Gummery, who's our associate head of school. Behind the scenes, our admissions events coordinator, Meg Blyler. Thanks so much for producing this event, Meg. And of course, myself, Cheryl Shank-Miller, Director of Enrollment Management, will be your MC this evening. So without further ado, we will go in that order. So Ellie, would you go ahead and kick us off? Tell everyone who you are, how many years you spent at EPS, and where you are in the world physically and virtually these days as a college student.
All right. Hi, I'm Ellie. I attended EPS for 6 years, so 5th through 12th grade. It's got a lot of EPS experience under my belt. I graduated last year, class of 2021, and I now go to the New School, which is a school it's like a small art school in New York City, and I study theater there. Currently in my house in Woodinville, Washington. But I will be going back to New York soon, and I am excited. And yeah, it's about all I have to offer.
Well, I'm sure you will have much more to offer this evening, Ellie. We're going to ask you lots of questions about what it was like to go through the college process at EPS and how things are going now and how you've made that transition after having spent a term at school. So next, Dr. Olson from our college counseling team. Welcome, Elena. Glad you're here.
Thanks. Glad to be here. As Cheryl mentioned, hi everyone, I'm Elena Olson. I'm a college counselor for half my job, and the other half of my job is teaching English in the upper school. And I hate using this word, but I guess it's efficient. I'm one of the more senior faculty at Eastside Prep in that I have been here this is my 16th year at the school. I started in 2006 and started just as a English faculty and have been in the college counseling, on the college counseling team, because we do have a team here at Eastside Prep, for about 10 years. I've been doing it so long that I'm not sure if it's 10 or 11, but somewhere around there. And specifically my role on the college counseling team is that of a writing coach. And I'll actually hand it off to Bart to talk a little bit more about that role and how our team works.
Okay, well, here he is, the most senior member. All right, well, here he is, the most senior member of this call, Bart Gummery. Hi, Bart.
Oh, most senior, yes. I will leave that alone for the moment, but you will hear from me later, Cheryl. Hi, everyone. My name's Bart Gummery. I started at Eastside Prep the same year Elena did, 16 years ago, originally at that time as the upper school head. But in my background, before I really started my world in education as an admissions officer at my alma mater, and I've been working in the college counseling process throughout my roles in independent schools. So I was really excited when I was able to transition more directly into that here. we have a really exciting program and a very unique one, and I look forward to talking more about that, solving the mystery of things like process coaches and writing coaches and how we run our program, but I'll tell you more about that in a bit. That's sufficient for now, Cheryl?
That is great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to give us some ideas to ground to here. And Bart, one of the things that you just mentioned in your introduction is our team approach, like this unique approach that we have to college counseling. Elena, when she introduced herself, talked about being a writing coach. So what does it mean to have a college process and a college program that involves process coaches, writing coaches? It sounds like you somehow fit into that mix as well, as our associate head of school for college counseling and alumni relations. So what is that all about in terms of having this team type of approach, and how is that different from other schools?
Well, it's very different in that most independent schools put a lot of resource, human and otherwise, into their college counseling program. One of the things that we discovered over time, and we had a very traditional program with college counselors working individually with students throughout all aspects of the process. What we were discovering, the process is becoming more and more tightly scheduled. People have to file applications earlier and earlier. There is more to do in the process than there was certainly when I started, and even 10 years ago. And so we had the brainstorm to divide the job up. But what we were finding was that in the fall, with just one person working with each student, that it was hard for the person to juggle all those roles. Those roles in the fall typically are helping students plan for applications, the process of applying, meeting with college reps who are visiting campus frequently at that time of year, and steering students through all the writing process and writing recommendations, the school letter of recommendation for students. And so we've divided up the role such that every junior and senior has 3 people assigned to them. I'm assigned to everyone, and I kind of take a more 10,000 foot view of each case, and I'm there to steer students as I learn more about their interests and so forth towards some schools that fit them best. Our process coach really helps walk them through all the nuts and bolts of the process, and our writing coach does the same with all of the writing, which is substantial in the college application process right now, and coordinates the writing of our school letters of rec, which are different from the teacher recs. And we've been really thrilled with what we've seen since then. The effect has been notable. It's somewhat funny right now. We're having our initial meetings with our juniors, and sometimes they're amazed to see a room that's filled with both parents and 3 EPS adults as their team. So they learn to speak up in a group setting of that quickly, but I think that uniformly people have been really pleased with the outcomes of that, and I know that we feel like we're able to take care of students through the process much better now. Okay,
great. Well, so thanks so much for that overview of what the process entails and how that team approach works. One of the things that you just mentioned was that college meeting and having a student with lots of adults supporting them in that meeting. One thing that I have found really unique about our approach is how we're centering students in those family meetings, and also the way that a particular tool that we have online is supporting students in really being at the center, being the driver of their college process. So Bart, can you talk to us about how students are the ones who are driving that college process at EPS?
Sure. I think that it's important. I make the comment all the time that the outcomes are important, but the act of making the choice is maybe even more important. And we really want students to not just wind up in a situation in which they're really happy and excited, but one in which they've been at the center the whole time, that they have real ownership of that choice, that they land in college with excitement about what they're doing and real knowledge about why they're in the place they are. So from the beginning, we help students do a lot of reflecting and a lot of research that really guides them towards figuring out what the best kind of match for them is. I don't think that you can simply say that there's, 10 schools out there and start with number 1 and then go through number 10 and apply to them and decide which one is which one you go to by quote unquote the best one I get into. It's really vital that students figure out what's best for them, and it's really fun to watch our students as they go through this process transition from the point where they worry a lot about what colleges want from them in the application process to instead feel empowered to think, what do I want from a college in this process? I think that's the proper way that they ought to be shopping, so to speak, in this process. And we really try to put them at the center from the start and make it very clear that it's their process to own, but with an incredible amount of guidance and support of people around them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really appreciate that note, because it's your process and you're not alone in that, and that support continues. So can you talk to me a little bit about, Bart, one of the things you were saying before we jumped on the call was a quick email that you were jotting off to a student whose birthday it was today. Talk to me about alumni engagement and what that looks like at EPS broadly.
Well, obviously the other, my title implies that I'm in charge of alumni relations, and in so many schools, older schools, truthfully, that's a person that's out trying to raise money from alumni. Our oldest alumni are now 32 years old, so that is not our focus in our relations with alumni. Our focus is much more on what they're doing in their life, and with our young alumni, specifically what they're doing in their college experience, and how our program here, both academic and in the college counseling program, how that lines up with what they're experiencing when they go off somewhere. So it thrills me to have a really great reason to be in touch with everyone, find out what they're involved in, how their experiences are, where their experiences are leading to them, how our program here has supported them or not supported them and what they've done, and hopefully we improve through that. A sidelight of that is that we are increasingly making our students, as they go through the search process, connect with our alumni on various campuses or alumni who have recently graduated. And I think that's adding so much depth and context to our students' understanding of those places. In fact, I am reminded, hadn't been thinking about it before, that Ellie graciously responded to an email I sent her early in the fall about a student who was interested in schools in New York, and I know they had at least one conversation about those experiences and what he might think about more if he wanted to be a student at any college in New York and at the new school in general, in specific. So we're really excited to be able to make those connections through this process. That's
awesome. So Bart, I'm curious if you can share just a little bit more in a while about some specifics regarding the process, but I actually want to toggle, that's a perfect segue to one of our audience questions that we got in the chat to kick things off. And thank you, Eason, for this question. It's great to have you here again. Just had you in our tour the other day. So Eason's question is, how is the community? Is it strong and supportive? And Ellie, I'm wondering if you can talk about that from the alumni perspective of how you found the community to be as an EPS student and how it's part of your life, even after graduating from EPS. There you go.
Can you hear me? I was like, haven't been on Teams for a while, so yeah. So I was part of the EPS community for quite a long time. I also worked as, I was the EPS, one of the EPS community outreach chairs for the Student Leadership Council. And so I did a lot of work like around creating community at EPS. And I think that has like translated into college in my academics, in the way that I approach studying, and the way that I approach my classes. I can see that my way of critical thinking is different than those of my classmates because of the way I learned to think at EPS. And then socially, I've always been someone who's pretty outgoing and trying to create a community. And that was something that I practiced a lot at EPS, a lot of community building. I've also done that in college as well. Yeah, but the community generally is pretty supportive, especially around college stuff, because we're all going through the same thing, and it's college prep school, so there's a lot of talk of college and stuff, and there's a lot of support from everybody. You know, if you're having a bad day with writing your college apps, there's always somebody there who you could talk to and relate to.
Mm-hmm. And one of those people is often the writing coach when it comes to talking and relating about the challenge of writing those applications. So Elena, can you talk to the community specifically aspects? I mean, 16 years at EPS, it's no accident that you've stuck around. You've done that intentionally. So can you talk about community support as you see it, maybe specific to the college process even?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's no secret that I'm a big fan of the EPS community, both in terms of just working as a faculty member there and thriving in the strong relationships that I have with colleagues and the adult community, and then certainly the student and family community is something that has kept me here for 16 years and counting. I think, when I started at Eastside Prep in 2006, it was even smaller than it is now. We had a 9th and 10th grade. And in fact, our second graduating class in 2010 was 4 students. Our first graduating class was 11 students. So that gives you an indication of what a tiny place it was. That meant the community was everything. And even as we've grown, a lot of the qualities that I loved immediately about that smaller Eastside Prep have remained. I think it's, and in working with seniors, we see the fruition of this. In general, it's a very kind community. I mean, students, and this is something that I'm actually just repeating that I hear students say both in their writing for college applications, this comes up, and then when I've heard student panels at our open houses and events like that, students will talk about the fact that, they are part of a kind community, that if they come to EPS from other schools, they feel welcome, they feel like, they find their place, and that other students make space for everyone who's a part of our community. And then I think in my role as a writing coach, I get to work with students really closely on really the most profound self-reflection that most of them have done up to this point in their lives. And that's one thing that makes it so rewarding. And so I, again, and a lot of that self-reflection centers around how they have grown, particularly in their 4 years, in our upper school, and how they've grown in the context of the EPS community. And then I'll also say, and I was thinking about this when Bart was talking about our team structure and how unique it is. I think another thing that makes it somewhat unique is that all of us college counselors are also teachers, well, almost with one exception, but and that happens at other schools, but I think not to the degree, I guess, that it happens here, and that most of our team also teaches, and so we know students in that way. We also have an understanding of our school community, in terms of the classroom and those communities, and how to support students as teachers, as well as counselors. And I think that's something that sometimes I like having two parts to my job. Sometimes it's difficult, but whenever it's difficult, I think like, yeah, but I wouldn't really want to have it any other way. I think being a teacher makes my job as a college counselor easier and more rewarding, not only because I get to work with students that I knew in the classroom, but also, again, because I feel like I can navigate sort of our whole EPS world in a way that I wouldn't be able to if I was just there in a counseling role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having not only that team approach, but those multiple hats that everyone's wearing gives that sense of really understanding the student experience in a different way than if it's just that single role or that one person maybe who's in a single role who's helping a student, as might be the case in other schools' models. So what I want to spend a little bit of time with next is Ellie, just a retrospective look at your own college process, and if you can give us a sense of maybe what your first memory of anything college related was in the EPS process, if that comes to mind, like a first meeting or a first workshop that you did, something that stands out in your mind as like, oh yeah, that was kind of when we kicked things off, maybe college visits, something that comes to mind there. And then you just kind of what you remember from the student perspective and maybe how it felt to you to go through the college process as you reflect on those steps. So just if you can take us on a narrative journey, set the scene, if you will, to borrow from the theater references that you probably use often for your own college journey through EPS.
Yeah, so I unfortunately was doing the whole college application process during the midst of COVID. So that was really fun. So that provided different kinds of challenges. As far as my earliest memory of college counseling, I remember I think we had the first group meeting sophomore year, like towards the end of the year. Mm-hmm. And it's just sort of like, just casually just start thinking about it. And I, of course, panicked. I was like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I don't know what I want to go. Sort of spiraling. I actually think my first college counseling meeting, I think I cried. Like I was just didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and I was kind of putting a lot of pressure on myself. But then once I actually got into the process and sort of just end of junior year, beginning of sophomore year, basically the entirety of junior year and the beginning of senior year, I realized that I had a lot of support behind me and a lot of people to help me figure out what I wanted. And so the panic kind of calmed down a little bit, and I was like, okay, what is important to me in a school? What is important to me for my future? And I think it was really helpful to have like Mr. Gummery and Mr. Colello and just a bunch of people there to support me in my thoughts and what I wanted to do. So then it came to the application process. And like I said, it was during COVID, and I was also doing a lot of auditions for performing arts programs, which meant like literally doing my audition on a Zoom call like this. So that was a little bit difficult and definitely like stretched me a lot. But again, I think it was really helpful to have the support behind me and to know that like there are people I can reach out to help me in our community, like our theater director, Mr. Duncan. I reached out to him to help me, and like I just was able to use my resources to sort of get me out of that panicking spiral, I don't know what I want to do with my life type of mindset, and actually to turn that into what am I excited about and what can I do to make sure that my life fits that excitement. Mm-hmm. What college is the right choice for me. Yeah, that was basically my process.
Thanks for giving us that overview. And if folks are interested in seeing that Mr. Colello, who Ellie referenced, he's been part of our another community panel this year. So you can hear from him directly if you go to our community panel recordings. But if you go to the information packet that is linked in our event Q&A, if you are viewing this after the fact, you can access that through the admissions website at eastsideprep.org. And starting on page 9, you'll be able to see details about the college process process, including photos of those process coaches and our writing coaches, and just an overview of some of the different steps of what that process entails. And Ellie, you totally got it right. Mr. Montgomery was nodding his head, I could see, as you were talking about that initial sophomore meeting. So Bart, can you talk to us a little bit more about kind of this arc of how much information we're giving folks? Because one of the things that Ellie talked about was that initial feeling of overwhelm and that sense of, I don't know what I want to do with my life, which is completely understandable. So how do we help shape that journey specifically for students in terms of the timeline for the college process?
Yeah, happy to do that. I mean, the reality is that as early as 9th grade, students start thinking about this / worrying about it. Even our own kids that come up from our 8th grade sometimes will say things like, "Oh gosh, now everything I do counts," and which drives me nuts on some level, because everything they've done in their life up until that point counts too. But it reflects, I know full well, it reflects a reality that they're worried about how this will now appear on a transcript and be read in the college admissions process. So in the 9th grade, we try to give them enough information about what is helpful and what makes for a good high school career, beyond the obvious. And one of the messages we most get out is, hey, figure out who you are, what you're interested in. Think about the things that you would really like to be involved in that fuel you, not that drag you down or that you think you need to do for someone else. And, so for one student like Ellie, that's, jumping into the theater program with relish. For another, that's joining our Fuser team and figuring out how to do things that I can't even explain. So I don't know. For yet another, that's engagement in a sports program, music, so many things. What we really try to help students do is have the understanding that developing themselves through their high school years is the most important thing they can do for themselves and for the college process. Come sophomore year, as Ellie mentioned, we'll start to have some things. I can't remember, Ellie, whether your class was the last one that did visits that didn't get scuttled by COVID. But one of the things we do typically with the 10th grade class is bring them out just for a day to see the University of Puget Sound and the University of Washington, so they can get two really contrasting college campuses, sizes, locations, so on and so forth, so they can start, not because we are really pushing either one of those places, but instead so that they can start to realize that various aspects may appeal or not appeal. And I think it's educational for all of them to realize that, they like something that their best friend doesn't like, and vice versa. So we start to get them to, as Ellie said, to think very generally, and try to calm them down that there's a long time between now and when they have to make a decision. Come junior fall, we start to work more earnestly with students, probably collectively with the junior class first, although we also make things like the college reps who come to visit the school accessible to the juniors. We have a college fair that we organize along with other independent schools in the area, and we meet with all the juniors individually and coach them on what might be good schools for them to go look at given their interests at that time. So we do a lot of that groundwork. And then, as I mentioned, come January, or really December, we have the students all do a very extensive questionnaire, which helps put into framework some of the ideas that they need to be thinking about themselves that then apply to looking for a college. And after that, we start a series of meetings with them and that college counseling team that I described before. I think one thing that's pretty unique too is that we also invite parents right into that. is frankly, in many independent schools, a fear of the parents being overly involved and taking the spotlight away from the students and maybe exerting pressure. We haven't found that at all. We've actually found our parents to be great allies in the process and to help students appropriately through this. So we bring them right in for that initial meeting and 2 other formal, quote unquote, family meetings that stretch into the senior year. But then each individual process coach and writing coach works very frequently with kids on an individual basis from there on out. And that may mean, 10-minute meetings once every 2 weeks for one student. That may mean a whole hour of sitting down with one of us to really flesh out a more complicated problem, or to work on a opening personal statement with Elena, so on and so forth. I'm sure I could go into a lot more detail, but I've already spoken too long.
Well, it's a good segue, Bart, because one of the things that I wanted to ask about was, when does the majority of a college application get written? When does this happen? Dr. Olson, can you talk with us about kind of what is the time period and what is the process by which students are composing essays, short answers, and our college writing coaches are composing those letters on behalf of the school, as Bart mentioned earlier?
Sure. So the college writing process and application process really is a long project, a long process, in that, and it's individualized for every student, and every student works on it, of course, somewhat differently, but in many ways, the writing process begins for students right around now in their junior year. So winter of their junior year. As Bart mentioned, we're meeting right now with all of the 11th graders and their families, and certainly they're not, sitting down to start writing their personal statement right now necessarily, but in those meetings, we are talking a little bit about what the personal statement in particular, which is the main piece of writing, what that entails, and even more importantly, trying to plant some seeds to prompt the self-reflective thinking that is so important and at the core of the college writing. And one question that I like to center that around is, what for each student, what do you want colleges to know about you? And it's a seemingly simple question, but obviously a little more complex when you start thinking beyond, like, well, I want them to know I'm a really good student, and I want them to know that I'm involved in, these various activities. Yes, and those things will all come across, elsewhere in the application and in teacher recommendation letters. Not that you don't necessarily want to talk more about any of those things in your own writing, but this becomes about, what are things that are meaningful for you that you value, that you do, experiences you've had that have shaped you, right? Start thinking about those things. And that process starts right around now. And then we work with 11th graders sort of more formally starting in the spring, meeting with each student, getting them started on the brainstorming process for the personal statement, because that is the piece of writing that takes the most thought and drafting and revision. And many of them, and Ellie can probably speak to this a little bit, it's a good idea to try to get writing done over that summer between junior and senior year, because there's time and space to do that. So we set them up to be able to do that writing over the summer. We can certainly be working with them over the summer as well. We also have an intensive summer workshop in August for all rising seniors that focuses on writing and on the application, because senior fall is busy and a lot of writing is still happening senior fall. I'm in meetings with students throughout fall trimester and in the winter. But we really try to sort of front load their process so that so that they are well underway with the writing and the applications by the time 12th grade begins. And our program is designed so that every student is ready to apply by November, which is when the early deadlines are, because we don't want any student to not be able to apply then because, you know, they're behind or they're not ready. So that's that time frame. I think there was a second part to your question, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I mean, I think just getting that overview of when students are really doing the majority of that writing and how that interfaces with the college timeline, I think that's really helpful just in terms of knowing that we are really trying through those workshops in the summertime and through the work that we're doing with students leading out of 11th grade and into that summertime period, that we're giving them a lot of space and encouragement to get so much of that done in that time frame. They get that support in terms of you all being there for them as writing coaches and guiding them through that process. So that, yes, as a senior year hits, it's not, I have to do all these things all at once.
Exactly. Yeah. And the world of college applications, as probably everyone knows, has become in some ways more complicated, and that there's no one size fits all, right? I mean, one college may ask for no writing, another college may want, you know, the personal statement plus 4 additional supplemental essays. And for that reason, and because of course our program is really student-centered, you know, the writing process is so individualized for each student, and that begins in the spring. And it's this combination of getting them information they need, like what are the common application essay prompts and what is a personal statement and what are these additional essays I might have to write for different schools, but then also really making that process individualized for each student. So, and that I think is the key to them being ready to apply, you know, come November of senior year.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was thinking about earlier was how many colleges are students applying to? So Ellie, I'm wondering if you can tell us, you talked a little bit about having these audition processes for a lot of the schools that you're applying to, but what was the number of schools that you applied to? Did that number feel large? Did it feel small? Did it feel just right? Kind of where were you on that? And then Bart, if you can provide a little context in terms of average number of applications and giving us a sense of what most students are doing at EPS. So Ellie, if you want to kick us off, that'd be great.
Okay, sorry, my mute button just loves to take a long time. I applied to 6 colleges, which felt like a good number for me. There were a few other schools I was like thinking about, but I wanted to make sure that every single school I applied to, I would be excited to go to. Yeah, so I ended up applying to 6, which was actually like quite a low number compared to my classmates. I have some people who applied to like 27 colleges or like crazy numbers like that. But honestly, I think 6 was a really good number for me. Obviously, it's different for everyone. Like I didn't want to apply to any schools in California, but I know like for California, a lot of the same application, you do one application and you apply to multiple schools. So like there's things like that. But yeah, I only applied to 6.
Okay, yeah. So Bart, for context, how many colleges are most EPS students applying to?
Well, I can tell you that the average number was 8.7 last year. So but that doesn't mean much in reality, because some of those people applied to 1 through early programs and were done, and some of them applied to, obviously on the other end. Ellie states an extreme, but yeah, we do have students who apply to that many. That many, you know, is against our recommendations. I think one of the things that students and families sometimes underestimate is that admissions people are really pros. They read applications carefully, and when an application comes in and reads very generically and not like a student has really invested in it carefully and with an idea of the place to which they're applying, clearly coming through in that. It often doesn't result positively. In fact, I can show you real stats. I can't show them to you right at the moment, but we have stats that kind of show that the percentage of acceptances kind of goes down with the higher numbers. I mean, certainly when kids crest above 20, they tend to be accepted at fewer colleges. And I think that's because you just run out of time and resources to be that invested in that many places. Mm-hmm. That said, the market has become way more competitive. When I started, 35 years ago, Stanford accepted, 23% of their applicants. Now it's 5% or under. So it's harder. It certainly generates a situation where I can completely understand what drives students to apply to a few more rather than a few less. And certainly we have to deal with a greater amount of uncertainty. And so we just help students navigate that and families navigate that as best can be done. What I liked that Ellie retained from this was that, the place we most want everybody to do is, would you be really happy going to each one of these places? That's a key question that we ask people to really think about. Is there anything on your list that you're doing without real interest? And if it is, get it off there. It doesn't serve. It doesn't make any sense to apply to an extreme reach just because you heard it was a good place. It doesn't, and a place isn't safe if you're not interested in going to it. So at the far end of the spectrum, at either end of the spectrum, we try to make sure that people are really invested in each of their choices.
Mm-hmm. One of the sets of questions that we often receive from families as they're going through the admissions process is around how do schools know EPS and how are they going to view our students? And we actually have a couple of questions in the chat that are pertaining to that. And the first one that I'll highlight is around how EPS experiences, as you were saying earlier, Bart, having that involvement in theater or a sports team or the Fuser program is going to be really helping students to invest in who they are now and who they want to become now, so that it's really seeding things for the future that might be really noteworthy for them. So the question is, does EPS offer extracurricular programs at the level that would stand out in a college application portfolio or offer counseling toward building the non-academic areas in the application early on? This family says we're applying to 6th grade, and so we just filled out the activities and interests form, that form. Thank you so much for doing that. So it's fresh on our mind. So this whole idea of what are the things that are happening now in the EPS experience, and how are those going to be viewed by colleges and universities as they're filled out on interest and activity forms in a common application, for example?
Well, I certainly don't want anyone to start thinking about their 6th grade activities and worrying about what that might do to their chances at Yale in 7 years. But I do think that that it isn't so much the extracurriculars in which you involve yourself in. I mean, to some degree, you can't help but know, you can't know what a college is going to want that way and where they're short and where they're long in any given year. What really matters, though, is that students get invested in the things that they do. And it's that investment and that excitement and that energy that I think translates in a college application and makes a real difference to admissions officers. I'm amazed at how well that translates in the process, given that it's all or mostly on paper, so to speak. And I'm always amazed in sitting down with admissions folks and talking to them about our applicant pool, how much they say, well, I just can see this kid being really lively in our school, and I'm excited about the energy she brings. And so that's one of the things that's putting her over the top. And I don't think that has anything to do with, what activity it was, but it's more about the fact that this student is excited by the life they live, and that is going to translate to that campus. So, I'm thrilled. I will say part of the question was, does EPS offer extracurriculars of the quality that stand out? I mean, from the time that Elena and I started, my gosh, our offerings are incredible now that way. And what is nice is to really have the critical mass of students now that we can do some really interesting things, and there's people interested in almost anything. I think a lot about our Fuser team, which I mentioned earlier, and I still remember when the faculty member came and talked to me about it, pitched it to me, and I thought, oh my gosh, his excitement about it was so great, and he had all these requirements of what kids were going to need to do to be involved, and I thought, he's going to do all this and 3 kids are going to be interested. Well, I was proven very wrong. 25 kids signed up that first year, despite the fact that they had to write 5 one-page papers to qualify to do it, explaining various aspects of the research that would go into this. Really incredible. And I see that kind of example happening all the time here, that there's really there's a lot of energy that people pour into their life outside the classroom, and that does matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say in some ways it keeps parity with the school admissions process in terms of when we're getting to know students in their process, whether it's middle or upper school applications to EPS, when we get that sense of their engagement in even just one thing that's of value to them, versus having a whole lot of things that they do, a whole lot of things on that interest and activities form. That engagement, that excitement, that curiosity, that interest is palpable. You really do see that, whether that's that electronic paper, so to speak, or whether that's actually talking with students in interviews, talking with parents and guardians in interviews. So I think that's something that's similar between the school and the college admissions process. One of the things that I want to toggle into, and then we'll get to another one of our audience questions, is where EPS students are now in their college process. And I'm actually going to send live just a graphic that you'll see. You'll see the college attendance list if you look in the EPS information packet that Meg posted in the chat. And you'll see where our students have matriculated. And this map, including our international representation through the mini globe down there below, is really indicating that we've got students all over the place. So Ellie, I'm wondering if you can ground us in some real life examples of where are your friends now? So if you just think about the sample of folks that you know from your EPS experience, those who you're closest to of your classmates, where are they all now? I mean, I imagine a lot of them are at home and attending college remotely in January 2022, for better or for worse. Hopefully Omicron is not here to stay. But where have they matriculated to different colleges and universities? Long mute and go. You're on.
There. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry, guys. As far as my friends, we kind of went like this. There's a lot of us on the East Coast. And there's also, I find a lot of people go to California. And yeah, I have one of my good friends, Connor, goes to school in Sarah Lawrence in New York as well. And he's the only other person really I talk to that is in school in New York. But we're kind of all spread out. A couple of people in Colorado from my grade. There's a lot of people actually on the East Coast. And then there's some people who stay in Washington as well. So yeah, people spread out.
And do you feel like there's any one school that your friends were like, we got to apply here, we got to go here, this is the place where we're all going to go? Do you feel like there's a sense of a magnetism towards any particular places, or do you feel like your friends are just at all sorts of different schools?
I mean, not really. 2 of my really good friends go to the same college, Santa Clara in California. But usually everyone's process is pretty different. I mean, obviously there's some overlap, like sometimes people will be applying to the same school. But I think for the most part, people kind of choose different things. Yeah.
So one of the questions that we got in the chat was around our relation with, let's say, what would be referred to as Ivy League colleges, or what might be referred to by some folks as top colleges. So do top colleges recognize the strength of EPS curriculum in students? And in general, how many kids per year go to the top 10 to 20 colleges? So Bart, can you talk to us about the idea of a top college and unpack that a little bit in terms of the way that that has been framed, maybe by certain things like US News and World Report or other rankings, and how EPS interfaces with that idea of top colleges and universities?
Oh boy, yeah. So I guess I would say, sort of building off of Ellie's point, I really want to say that one of the things that I'm most proud of and excited about is that no, there isn't kind of a place or a set of places at which people feel like everyone wants to get in. I've worked at another school at which I think students more felt that there were winners and losers in the process, and they felt a little beat up and chewed up by the end of it, or many did. And I really like that what ends up happening with our group is they go off and they pursue places that seem to fit them individually. And what is reflected in that map is an incredible diversity of places because of that reality. Certainly, that said, gosh, we have, yes, people applying to the most selective colleges in the country. And I would say that, the notion of top colleges, there was a different list of top colleges when I worked at a school in Boston. They have very different opinions than this. When I worked in Richmond, Virginia, that was a different group of top colleges. And now that I'm out west, there's a different group of top colleges. So there are some that probably transcend that. But I might be, getting away from the point of the question. The point of the question is, sure, people, admissions, I think people overestimate the degree to which admissions officers value schools and underestimate the degree to which they value individuals. But it is their job to really know each school community. So typically we work with people who are in charge of this region, within this. So you may be coming from University X and you handle the Pacific Northwest, and your job as that admissions rep is to know the offerings at all these places. And we work hard to develop those relationships with people so that they really know Eastside Prep and what makes it special and what makes it unique and what the quality of things going on is here. I think that happens pretty easily. That's probably a place at which I have some advantage. I've been working in this field for 35 years. Some of my best friends in life are admissions people and other college counselors all over the country. And so we have an easy relationship that way. But I would never want anyone to think that, going to school X over school Y amongst schools of this quality provides a real advantage in the admissions process. I think it actually provides an advantage in the high school experience, which then provides some advantage in the admissions process. But honestly, I would not want to pitch EPS on the idea that, hey, we're in tight with the Harvard admissions office, and so therefore come here.
Yeah, I appreciate what you said too, Bart, about, just really trying to bracket that as you're choosing a high school experience that's going to be enriching for you. And so you want that to be something that is important in and of itself, but not because of exactly where that's going to lead, but because it's going to lead to having great experiences that lead to a full life right now, that will lead to a full life in the future as well. Elena, I think you had something you wanted to share.
Yes. I was just going to add a little bit to that, which is, I think, our job as college counselors is to, in addition to working with our students, part of our job is to work with and get to know college admissions folks all around the country. And in a lot of ways, our work with the admissions folks at some of the most selective colleges in the country, it's no different from our work with admissions folks at less selective colleges. The only difference in those institutions really in some ways is selectivity. If you think about, why students, as we've been talking about, right? Like the most important thing for us is a good fit for students, and great educations can be had at thousands of colleges in the United States. And so our job is to get to know these institutions, and also to help these institutions get to know us, and that's part of their job as well. And I think, again, as a team, I think we do that really well, in part because there are a lot of us who can get out and visit these campuses and talk to folks, and they come visit us as well.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Yeah. Bart, was there something you wanted to add on to that?
Well,
again?
just I'm really glad Elena brought up that last point. When I was talking about the strength of having a big team, that is one of the things. I mean, we've been limited a little bit over the last couple of years in where we could all get out to, but we do have a reach of visiting campuses, going to conferences, things of that nature, which adds to these interactions. That is substantial, given that there are 7 of us in the team. So.
Mm-hmm. And along the lines of this question about, again, some schools have extremely competitive admissions processes, just in terms of the amount of applications that they have relative to the number of students that are applying. This next question is, how do you instill a sense of realistic expectations in your students without discouraging them? So how do we walk this line of giving students a sense of what the possibilities are, while also wanting to ground that in data or the lived experiences of other EPS alums? So talk to us about some of the ways that we navigate this space of encouragement, but not wanting to set students up for, getting a whole lot of disappointing letters, those thin letters in the mail, or now in email. Yeah.
In their portal.
Yeah.
So, that's such a great question. Thank you for whoever wrote that. It is 1 part science and 2 parts art form, honestly. And maybe one of the things that keeps me the most engaged in this is helping students go through this without losing confidence in who they are, but also not holding themselves back from taking on challenges that they are often more than ready to do. One of the things Elena talked earlier about us all being teachers. One thing that she didn't say, but is really important in that, is that in most cases, students come into the process knowing their college counselor before they start with them. So they've known them in another context. And having been on the other side of that, having been a sole college counselor who got to know students really kind of midway through junior year, that initial meeting for some students can be really awkward in that situation, because they're now the full pressure of the experience is upon them, and now they're being asked all these kind of probing, self-reflective questions by this college counselor. And I think we get past that a little bit because the students already know that we know them, we like them, we're supportive of them, we've seen them do work in the classroom and have confidence in that. So I think that takes a certain amount of the awkwardness away from the student side of it. In terms of doing it, there's no one systemic way to make students feel brave enough, and yet on the other hand not over encourage the student who perhaps needs a little bit of restraint in the process. So it really comes back to the point that Elena made. We know each student individually, and we work really individually with them. And I think we develop relationships that are strong enough such that we can be fairly blunt with them. If we think that they're being too cautious, we'll tell them that. If we think that they're being too stretchy in it, we'll tell them that. And I will say this, always with the message, look, no matter what you do, we'll support you. So if you want to, I'm posing some concerns, but I promise to, we'll support you in whatever decision you make on this. This is your journey.
Mm-hmm. Great. So in terms of thinking about that journey, one thing that we got a question about in the chat is where else is that journey leading? So, of course, this vision of EPS is to inspire students to create a better world. So one of the questions that we're getting next is, what have alumni gone on to do in helping communities? That could be their home community, that could be communities far flung. So I'm curious from Bart and Elena in terms of knowing these students and seeing these journeys over time, but Ellie, you may even have a sense from other alumni that you know, and certainly as a sibling of older EPS students even before you that have gone before you, you might have some anecdotes that you'd like to share as well. So so if folks want to just unmute as they have some ideas to share. Bart, you can go ahead and kick us off.
Oh gosh, I mean, I know as soon as I start answering this, I'm gonna, this call is gonna end, and I'm gonna think of 3 people I should have mentioned. I think of one of our alums who got involved even early on in a group that promoted world peace through ultimate frisbee, and she's been incredibly engaged. Specifically, this is a group that was engaged in Middle Eastern peace and communication between, I believe it's Israeli and Pakistani students through ultimate frisbee. Her passion for that, her engagement in that, her involvement in that has been really impressive. I go back to our very first graduating class. We had a student who very kind of quiet but extremely bright guy who got engaged in a program at Arizona State University in the engineering program, developing more fuel efficient vehicles. And he, I believe, is continuing to work in that field, but has, grew really excited about improving the world through fuel efficiency, and I think he was probably on the climate jump well ahead of many of his peers. Those are 2 that jump at me. Elena, you got one that?
Yeah, I was thinking of both of those students you mentioned. I think, I'm just impressed. I guess I can speak to, again, thinking about all of the things I get to learn about our students as I'm working with them in their college writing application process. And a lot of the writing they do is actually about this question, sort of, what matters to you about making the world a better place. Most colleges and universities are wondering about that as well, wanting to foster that in students and wanting students who want to make an impact. And so students end up writing about that. And truthfully, we have students who are already doing that in such impressive ways. We had some students in the last couple of graduating classes who were working in sort of environmental education and actually founded an official nonprofit that was centered on sustainability and particularly focusing on just getting the word out about how to live your life more sustainably. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and again, I think with all of these things, what's impressive is not just like, our alumni and our students who are doing these things, but that we have the students who are active and engaged in this kind of work are doing it because they want to do it. I think there's no point in being of service to one's community if you're doing it as a resume builder or, as a way to impress colleges or impress your future employer, because, what really matters is that you're actually invested in the change that you're trying to bring about. And that's, that's, as Bart said, we have a lot of examples of that.
Mm-hmm.
Nicely put. And I guess all I'd add to that is I'm impressed by how top of mind it is for our students and alumni, even maybe when they aren't yet in a place where they can exert that in the way that they may in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ellie, does anything come to mind in terms of either classmates of yours and things that folks are doing that you see have an impact on that better world, however small or large today, or folks that have come before you at EPS? What comes to mind? You are unmuted. It just doesn't look like it for you, but we can see you.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Sorry, lost my train of thought. I think it's hard to come up with alumni that I think have done amazing things just because there's so many of them doing so many different things. But I was just thinking about my senior year. We kind of got back in person after everyone had figured out where they were going to college and what they were going to do for the rest of their life, or what they thought they were going to do for the rest of their life, according to where they were going to college. And I think it was just like a really beautiful thing to kind of look around at my classmates, some of whom I had known since we were 10, and just see what different yet equally amazing things everyone was planning on going to do. It was really beautiful to kind of see that growth. And I just think there's a lot of room, like in my classmates, there's a lot of people just doing really brilliant things and really different things. And I think it's really beautiful to see. Yeah.
Well, it is really beautiful to see the way that you all are able to talk about your experiences within this program on the delivery and receiving side of the college counseling process, and just the ways that you've really worked with the various constituents involved in that process to benefit, Ellie, your own individual journey. You see how that's worked for your classmates, and Bart and Elena, you've guided so many students through that. And so I'm just really grateful for you all taking the time to share some of those experiences with our audience tonight. And since we are fresh out of questions, we are going to wrap things up. Any parting thoughts, any words of wisdom? I know a lot of times the college admissions process, the school admissions process can heighten emotions for folks. So I'm wondering if there's any last words of wisdom. And Ellie, you're still unmuted, so I'm wondering if from the student side there's anything that you want to impart to other students that are applying. And Ellie might have frozen right as I asked her that. You still out there, Ellie? We'll go to Elena. Elena, from the writing side of things, from the teacher side of things, who's doing remote teaching right now, what are some words of wisdom that you would impart to close things out this evening?
Oh gosh, I would say, thinking about some of the questions and topics we've talked about tonight, and some of the themes that have emerged through those, I think the college process can feel stressful and complicated and big, and it is all of those things. And at the same time, you will all find the support that you need. Certainly, if you're here at Eastside Prep, that is here for you in spades. And I would say high school, upper school is about being a student and figuring out some of the things about who you are, right? You're not going to figure out everything. More of that will happen in college, more of that will happen after college. But I think, one of the most important things, and one of the things I most love about our Eastside Prep community, is that there's so much about what happens in our upper school that is about helping students explore and do things, try out new experiences, pursue the things that they know they love, and to learn how to be, an increasingly sophisticated student. And that's really, that's the most important college prep, right? Is being excited about being a student and figuring out some things about, what matters to you and what you like to do.
Mm-hmm. Really appreciate that. Bart, what would you share from your perspective in terms of just some words of wisdom to close this out? Oh.
Well, got it. Those are always so high pressured, right? The last thing. I think Elena already said one thing, which is really just enjoy the journey, and it will take you to good places. And I think I don't know whether we are speaking to primarily a parent audience or some students, but I think parents, I'd really urge you to trust your kids and urge you to heartily support their interests, because their interests will take them to good places. I've seen very good examples of that, and I've seen very sad outcomes of students who were pressed into pursuing something that they thought was better to pursue. And I think students, same goes for you. Really trust your gut. Pay a lot of attention to what's important to you. And it will take you in good directions. I also say that it is this whole process gets built up into more drama than it needs to be. There's always a story at the end of the admission cycle about some student who had perfect grades and perfect test scores and didn't get in anywhere. But that's because that's interesting reading. It's not interesting reading to read, this student went through the process, kind of figured out what they wanted, and then, got into some and didn't get into others and matriculated. But that really is the reality for most people. And so I think that, please don't, if this is looming in your future as your first experience with it, don't fear it. It really is a fulfilling process more than it is a difficult process.
Yeah, appreciate that, Bart. And we've got Ellie back. The Woodinville interwebs were not kind to you tonight, but what would you like to share as some parting thoughts with our audience?
Sure. I would say for those 6th graders out there, have fun. Don't worry about college yet. And even for the 9th graders, I think something that's hard when you go to a college prep school is you think a lot about what you're going to do for college. But I think, as Mr. Gumry was saying earlier, like, it's more important that you take the time to find yourself and what your values are and what you're passionate about, and you'll find your way through your college process more easily if you know what you want to do as a person and what you want to contribute to the world. So first, find yourself and have fun, and then get to the hard work of figuring out where you want to go to college.
Woohoo! Well, I can't think of any better note to end on than that. Ellie, thank you so much for being here, and we wish you all the best with your continued college career at the new school, and wherever the journey is going to take you. We're excited to hear more from you and see you again in the future. We know we will. Dr. Olson, thanks so much for taking the time. We know that remote teaching and toggling to remote teaching involves a lot of prep, so we really appreciate that precious time as you've been going through that process this week. Bart, my colleague, and I am so grateful that you are at the helm leading this team of people and inspiring students, really drawing upon that wealth of knowledge that you have. We give you a hard time about being the old guy around EPS, but really, aside from some easy jokes that we can make, it really is a wisdom that comes with your experience. And so we're grateful that you're able to impart that to so many folks in so many ways. Thanks again to Meg Bleiler for producing our event tonight. Thanks to all of you for being our audience and for taking the opportunity to just engage thinking about this process. Many of you who asked questions, we're appreciative of those, and we wish you all the best in your school admissions process, your college admissions process eventually, and of course, the rest of 2022. So thanks everyone. Take care.